This intro will be a tad longer than usual as we're summarising the plots of all three films. Here goes. Deep breath. 2011 kicked off perhaps the greatest film trilogy of the decade in the form of the Planet of the Apes reboot, which was initially inspired by studies and articles in the early 2000s of apes raised as if human. The trilogy follows and completes the entire life arc of Caesar as he leads his race towards ultimately establishing their own independent society. Starting with Rise, in a bid to create the cure to Alzheimer's, Will Rodman, played by James Franco, creates a substance which inadvertently empowers Caesar towards enhanced intelligence and emotions. After Will initially raises him, Caesar becomes imprisoned in an animal sanctuary which he eventually escapes before exposing his fellow apes to the same intelligence-enhancing drug and freeing them, assembling a large ape colony who revolt against their captivity at the hands of mankind. The movie ends showing the global spread of simian flu caused by the mass outbreak of the substance. Dawn is set during the aftermath of the outbreak, where only the few genetically immune humans have survived. Meanwhile, the apes have grown in numbers, intelligence, and organisation. Human survivors near the current homelands of the apes require access to a dam for electricity, but must cross paths with the apes to do so. Tensions rise as there are good and bad amongst both groups, and those who, like Caesar, strive for peace and harmony, are unable to prevent the hostiles from causing conflict. Fights break out and Koba betrays Caesar, after questioning why he is so accommodating of the humans. Koba takes his evil too far, including destroying the apes' newfound homeland, and an injured Caesar is regrettably forced to kill him. Despite efforts to the contrary, a war between humans and apes is now inevitable. And so, war concludes the trilogy as the apes are forced into war with an army of humans led by a crazed, power-hungry colonel after the apes suffer heart-wrenching losses, including Caesar's wife and one of his children. Caesar embarks on his own journey, feeling compelled to avenge the fallen apes as he constantly wrestles with his shadow, and he is joined by Maurice, Rocket, and Luca. He finds this rebel army base, who have captured the apes already, before being captured himself. It becomes apparent that simian flu is now affecting the remaining humans of the world as they are starting to become mute and begin to cognitively decline. But in order to save the apes from captivity, slavery and inevitable murder, Caesar begins an act of defiance and comes face to face with the colonel. In an epic crescendo, the remaining apes escape to freedom and are finally able to establish a new home now that war has subsided, but Caesar is fatally injured and dies. Shortly before passing, Maurice vows to echo his magnificent legacy throughout the future of apekind as a new era begins.
Let my people go. Kick off the Dystopian series with a favourite of yours, Chris.
Favourite of mine.
And a recent favourite of mine. The recent Planet of the Apes trilogy.
Oh, mate. Mate. This is like dear to me as I think one of my favourite things to come out of the world of movie of last decade, like of the teens decade. The Planet of the Apes trilogy, like far better than it needed to be. And I think like my past experience with the Planet of the Apes films, I hadn't actually seen many of them, so I didn't have much to compare it to. So I've gone in very much like from a blind. I've watched like obviously
the first one.
Yeah, the one that everyone really like, pretty much everyone's seen.
The one that's got the most quotable moments from it, basically.
Yeah, it's a classic, really. But other than that, I hadn't seen many others. But I think the first thing that like put me off was the name. It's such a cumbersome title, like Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, it doesn't roll off the tongue
it
at all,
really
does
doesn't.
It? It's a bit like a worse version of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. Too many the to it, you know.
Yeah. But not to be put off by that, man. Like,
No.
I think like this is one of the most consistent movie trilogies that there is. And I would also throw out right now that I think it's one of the best movie trilogies of all time.
So obviously, because I've recently watched the final one, and I have a really good memory of the first one, and I'd say a pretty okay memory of the middle one. I liked them both, so it was quite easy to remember because I actually liked them.
Yeah.
And I actually think, especially now that I've watched the last one, it's like rounded off, and I see the full circle plan that they obviously had.
Yeah.
I think the filler moments and like scenes that they had constructed obviously were made up far recently, but I feel like they had an overarching plan.
Yeah.
And I like that in especially a sequence of like trilogies or a series type format. I like to see the full circle motion. Change has happened in the world, but arguably the writers, directors, whatever, had sown at the very beginning what they sort of envisioned for the ending to be. And when you're talking about what 2013 to
2011 to
2011. Okay, so you got that span of time, and they'd already had that in mind. I think that's quite impressive to pull off, and I
agree with that.
definitely feel like they did pull that off.
Yeah, I think it's testament to, well, I guess the main thing that underlies that span of time in that creation was the arc of Caesar, because you literally see him from birth to death. And I think he has one of the best arcs like I've ever seen in a trilogy. Like even within the films, he has like good progress, but like over that whole course, like I can't think of a character that has a better kind of arc within 3 specific films, from all the way birth to death, and to have achieved what you need to achieve as well. Like it completes the story, and I agree that you could see some of that vision, I guess, forming even from as early as the first one. So very commendable that.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would say as a bit of a criticism, but they did, like I said, their execution of it was quite good. There was just a lot of stuff for me that was slightly on the nose, at least for me.
Yeah,
I found it a bit on the nose.
What sort of things, man?
So obviously just recently watched War, so the Christian motifs in it could have been dialed down a bit. They didn't have to be so heavy. Like, I don't need the villain to cradle his cross every scene for me to get the gist that he's probably, a bit religious, or in this dystopian world, oh my god, people have returned to religion, what a surprise.
Yeah.
And
I guess it's such a fundamental likelihood, though, of like humans in that kind of context.
Yeah, and then like the crucifixion of the monkeys for punishment, just like the Romans did to Christ.
Yeah.
And then
it was almost Holocaust-like, man. That scene in War.
Well,
like,
yeah, I mean, it was very Great Escape, like, and like they're digging the tunnel and they come out the bottom.
But not done in like a cheesy way. And I think that's one of the best things I like about this trilogy, is that I felt like my initial stigma for Planet of the Apes, even including the classic original, was that it's a bit cheesy. And like I feel like it's quite incredible that they made something cheesy and quite a dated series, really, made into something that was so like spectacular and deep that you can actually take seriously, but not like too seriously.
Yeah, it was obviously
still entertaining.
It was quite a serious. The third film's obviously quite a serious setup. I mean, war, but the thing that I just remembered now, you're talking about that, it made me think of like a really gritty chimpanzee focused Chicken Run.
Oh god, yeah. With the scene of War trying to escape. Oh yeah.
And they're like fed grain.
Mate,
they get water. Move these stones. Don't lay eggs, but move these stones. Build this wall for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just that popped into my head. I was watching it, and I had like a bit of a chuckle to myself.
Funny that he used a spoon, mate. Just to...
we should probably start with War. I feel like we'll be going ass backwards otherwise. But the one thing that was the biggest biblical motif for me was at the very beginning, before we even start to see anything of like the villain, the colonel, and whatever.
We're talking War, right?
Yeah, we're talking War. Because it's the one that's freshest in my mind.
Yeah.
They literally say, oh yeah, by the way, Caesar, we've just come back from a long journey. There's a desert we've got to cross, and there's a paradise for chimpanzees across there. What biblical figure freed his people from an oppressive regime that were making them build things to cross a desert to find the promised land? Caesar is Moses, basically. And that's just a huge Exodus Moses motif, Christianity, Judaism, all thrown in, all the things that attach to Judeo-Christian religion. I was like, so on the nose. Cross a desert, get to chimpanzee paradise, bit on the nose. But then thinking back to like Dawn and Rise, the way that I think that's all connected, Caesar arguably follows the path of the revolutionary.
Okay.
So in Rise, I'd say encompasses that. He starts in like the false world. So like most revolutionary stories start of like someone's born into a world. Most of them actually from privilege. They're born in middle class. Che Guevara was born in middle class. Lenin, Trotsky, they were all born in like mostly fairly okay households, lifestyles.
He wasn't raised in like a ghetto or a
exactly.
party.
And that's what happens to Caesar. He's a pampered chimpanzee compared to his fellow compatriots that were taken from the wild. So he's only known human world. He's only known the human world. So he's a middle class chimpanzee. His mother was taken from the wild. Most of the other chimpanzees were also taken from the wild, and they're put in that testing facility.
Yeah.
But Caesar's born. He's born with his intelligence. He's born with gifts that were not given to him by any other means other than what the scientists had given to him.
Yeah.
He's raised by that scientist, James Franco.
Yeah.
And he's put in a very privileged world, but he's still treated as like an outsider and another because he's still a chimpanzee, even a smart one.
Yeah.
And then he has like those existential moments where he's like, he sees a dog on a leash and he's like, I'm on a leash too. Am I a pet? And he's like, no, I reject that. I'm going to get in the car. I remember like he refuses to get in the...
I thought that was a really cool moment to include. Easily they could have forgotten to explore that experience for
exactly.
him, you know?
And then you move on to Dawn, where like the revolution has come full circle. He's freed his people from that like primate sanctuary, and then the virus spreads.
It spreads at the end of Rise.
Yeah, at the end of Rise.
It's really taking hold in Dawn, I guess.
Yeah, because the opening of Dawn is like, by the way, this has happened in that time.
Yeah.
And then we then see Caesar in his new world, and it's the dystopian world. So the beginning movie isn't actually the dystopia world. It's almost like a prequel. So you, in like a traditional sense, you'd probably start with
it's like an
Dawn.
origin, through to the establishment of that dystopia, really.
Exactly. And what I liked about Dawn is I remember it was like the whole point of it seemed to me was juxtaposition of what the new society looks like from an ape perspective and a human perspective. Apes that live in accordance with nature. And I remember there was a quote from one of the guys of the humans, because there's parallels. You've got Caesar, who's a father. You've got the main protagonist, who's not Gary Oldman, the other guy. I don't know the actor's name. He's got a son.
Mark, maybe?
Yeah, he's got a son. He's got a wife. And there's like these nice parallels between each of their lives.
I'm not sure she was his wife, because I don't think she was the mom of the kid.
No, I haven't watched it in a while.
I think it was like kind of someone he'd met.
No, you're right, because the kid didn't like her because it wasn't his mum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
This is one of the things that... So, these films are so intelligently made, and I feel like that partly... The main reason I think that, or one of the main reasons, is because it explores so many... There's so many different intricacies going on between the characters at play. Like, it's not just telling the main story. You get a feel of everyone involved, or at least all the main characters. And, like, there's so many different themes that are explored. Like, you mentioned Dawn, which, like, takes Rise to, like, a much darker level. And it starts exploring things like betrayal and trust, like the whole thing with Koba. Like, to me, like, Rise was very much like turning like the spotlight back on us initially. So, like, from my opinion, like, Rise was kind of, and kind of Dawn, like showing the spotlight back on us as humans, and it was kind of like illuminating like our flaws, and it's kind of like trying to encouraging us to see the humanity in the other.
I think Rise as well puts the biggest criticism upon our society as we currently live in it, the modernity that we live in, and like it puts that spin on like man's desire to control nature and bend it to its will. So the negation of the fact that Alzheimer's and like the degeneration of our thing we value most, our human mind. And James Franco, the character, he tries to, like, I guess, play the stereotypical I will control nature, I am God with science.
Looking at he was like the neurological.
Yeah, and nature doesn't like that at all. It's like a rubber band effect. You pull really hard, and then whack, bang, right back at you. And that's nature's vengeance upon us. And Caesar's the spearhead of Mother Nature's vengeance, not one by of his own volition. He just wants to. That's why I like the opening scene and the ending scene. I always think about that. And Rise did this thing where you see Caesar's mother in nature with like all the other chimpanzees, and then the film ends with them returning to nature in the trees, the redwoods that appear quite a lot, the tree motif.
Oh mate, and did you notice in that, I think it was Rise, so there's a beautiful bit where, because I think the score is amazing, there's a bit where near the start when he first takes him to the park, they play like a version of the music, and then they play it again, but it's like more grand, like at the end when he goes off as an adult. Like, I love that callback because it's like playing on your memory, and it's like really thematicizing, if that's the word, like the events of the movie. And like, I feel like that just adds to the magic when you watch it again, because you kind of feel more connected to what's going on through the music. Like, I think this is like one of the most like underrated scores of movies, because like every time I've rewatched one of the films, I'm like, I forgot how cool that was. And then like you don't think about it, but then you go back and like, wow, it's just supreme. But yeah, as I was saying though, so yeah, I feel like it really like this is like a dystopia series which turns the spotlight on us and encourages us to kind of see like, you know, the humanity in the other. And then like you get to, so like Rise is kind of showing that, but then when you get to Dawn, it's very much ape on ape, because you've got like Cobra and the kind of like the off group that he ends up kind of brainwashing a few of them to turn against Caesar, and like there's that betrayal of like between Cobra and Caesar, and then like Caesar gives him like a chance for redemption as well, and like Cobra just rejects it, because we know he was like proper abused in that facility. And he's juxtaposed with, as you were saying, Caesar had a nice kind of start and Cobra had a shit time the whole way through.
I remember the most profound scene I remember with Cobra, actually, because that's arguably, I suppose, the most important point of Dawn, is that conflict, because it shows as well that the new laws of the new society, the ones that live in harmony with nature, or as harmonistic as animals can be, is that ape shall not kill ape. Yeah. And Cobra breaks that rule, negating his ape ship, I suppose. Yeah. And it's interesting that the weapons of choice he uses and he has to, because he has to use man's tools to convince the other apes that it was man who did this. And then, you know, after so long before you hate something, how long is it before you actually start to turn into the thing you hate? Paradoxically, I don't know if it's paradoxically, but the more and more he couldn't let go of his hate, and he probably has some justification. There's a scene where Caesar's trying to explain why he trusts the humans, and he's like, the humans have work to do at the dam, but obviously he doesn't say dam, he just says the humans have work to do, and then Cobra points to each one of his scars and goes, human work. And then human work. Human! Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he's not had the same privileged experience that Caesar has to see the good in humanity.
Caesar's seen both sides, and it helps that he is an ape.
And Caesar hasn't had the opportunity to see the bad in ape yet, and that's what Cobra serves at, and that's why he tries to show that. That's probably, I think, the most important point of Dawn, is that in the new society, ape isn't infallible. Ape is capable of being corrupted. And to be honest, this is probably a testimony to the writer's benefit too. That's already foreshadowed from the first film when we see Cobra, because he's vengeful to that dude. Do you remember the guy that was in charge of the pharmaceutical company?
Yes, James Franco's boss.
Yeah, he's the one that pushes the helicopter that has him in it. And he like writes the dude's name when they're like having that intelligence test stuff. Like he's got like, I've got my eye on you and I'm coming for you, and he does by the end of it. So you see there's a vengeance, hatred streak in him. Yeah. But it really manifests then into the hatred of what Caesar's becoming, because he probably fears that Caesar trusts the humans too much. He wants to be a human, because Caesar
Cobra
speaks
doesn't
first.
See him as a proper ape, almost. He's like, you're a bit of a traitor. You're part human, basically.
Yeah.
It's almost like, I feel like I can link it to like when you get football fans and you got like a family of, say, like Liverpool fans, but then like the youngest one like in the family is like an Everton supporter, and then some of them kind of like hate him, like you're not really part of this family. Like I heard I've heard bad stories, man, of families like turning on each other during like those rivalry moments. But it's like it goes quite deep with a lot of people. People are very tribal, and I think that's one of the things that quite unapologetically Dawn and Rise speak on, you know, like by war you kind of pass that, but I like that a lot.
I think the thing that I really picked up on was, it's a bit like I was saying in the first film really gives me like the revolutionary vibe, like you got a Che Guevara revolutionist sort of like idea of what Caesar is, and then by the middle film he's like achieved his status. It reminds me a bit of the relationship between Trotsky and Stalin. Cobra being Stalin, who seeks to assassinate Trotsky for his disseminations of ideas and policies, which is like, you know, ape shall not kill ape, which is also quite Orwellian. It reminded me a bit of like, you know, animal shall not kill another animal.
I thought because it's written on the thing as well, on the wall, albeit it doesn't change. Like Caesar doesn't get like maddened by power, but I think that's part of one of the reasons why Cobra had a bit of like hatred to Caesar, was because he saw that Caesar had this like control over his emotions as well. Like he wasn't consumed by revenge, and he could like inspire people, and Cobra wasn't that great at leading people. And maybe like he kind of, I don't know, maybe this is too optimistic a view, but I feel like potentially Cobra knew what his flaw was, but he just wasn't able to overcome it. But he saw that in Caesar, he had like, Caesar was stronger. Like I love that moment as well when they're fighting near the end of Dawn, and Cobra's like, Caesar's weak. and then like Caesar's like Cobra weaker, and it's
Yeah.
like ooh.
Which is pretty much it, because he's weaker because of the hatred that he has for the humans.
Exactly. He's consumed by his emotions. He can't like put that aside, you know.
The problem is though, is because Caesar meets Cobra for that battle, and they have that fight, and he unfortunately breaks his own rule. He kills Ape, and he tries to justify it, say, because you've killed an ape, you're no longer an ape, and therefore because you're no longer an ape, I can kill you. And that's sort of like, I guess, the grey area where us, the audience, are like, okay, but technically Cobra is still an ape. He isn't going to be accepted by the humans.
Yeah.
So it's technically Caesar broke his own rule. Ape shall not kill ape. He killed an ape. And
he really like
but that's
wrestles with that.
That's
idea,
what I'm saying,
though, doesn't he, man? Like
exactly, that's
I
the
love
whole,
that.
because the war, I feel, isn't just like war between man. It's the war over the idea that is Caesar.
Yeah.
So what will Caesar be? And that's one of the core themes that is attached to sort of like the Christian, Judeo-Christian motif of the final film.
Yeah.
Is legacy and history. And again, this is what I'm saying, like, too on the nose. Why, like the Colonel guy writes history, history, history on the wall. Like,
where was that?
So in the, like, they're in like the snowy mountain area where they're building the wall, and like the enemies are coming to attack the Colonel dude because he's been killing people that are going silent.
Yeah.
And he's got written on the wall, he like gives his thesis about, like, you know, this all began because humanity thought with its arrogance it could conquer nature and cure Alzheimer's disease, preserve the very thing that we valued most. And ironically, the thing that we desired most to cure, we end up creating it again, because now all the people that survived the virus are now regressing into a primitive state where they lose their minds, they can't speak, which, if anyone who's had Alzheimer's in the family knows, speech, motility, agency, what we deem as like the, you know, the human intellect just degrades until you're almost like a primitive version of yourself.
Yeah.
And it's one of the diseases where you actually feel like the person dies twice.
Yeah.
The person you know dies emotionally, psychologically, where you don't recognize them anymore, and then the physical body eventually forgets to breathe, forgets to dilate all the right organs, blood, all that. It just suddenly arrests, and then death occurs. Yeah. And that's arguably the metaphor for the human race. It's coming to its extinction as we know it, and it's a dawn of the planet of the apes now. The Colonel says that, like, history is going to be written differently now because we're going to be too stupid to write any history, where you're getting smarter. And that's what Maurice ends when he sees Caesar is dying. He says, I will tell the future generations of who you were. And he becomes a legend, a legacy, much like every revolutionary figure. They get killed, they become a martyr, they die in the name of something greater than themselves, even though they might be conflicted, have internal struggles, much like what Caesar does after killing Cobra, dealing with Cobra, and he enters the war, he tries to save his people, gets them to the promised land, like the Moses motif and all that.
And mate, what better way to justify having that legacy and being such a legend than showing all the fucking, like, all the moral challenges that he goes through, and like the challenges of like growth. Like that's what I'm saying, his arc is so sensational. Like, you've got themes of maturity where like even as early as Dawn, where like he's leaving home, like he leaves behind, like he's essentially like his father figure, and like adopting like the responsibility of like taking on the others who were like are a bit dumber at the time because they haven't had this like what is it, ALZ 17, whatever it's called.
ALZ.
And like controlling his aggression as well. That's very much like a thing of like maturity. And then you've got obviously like sacrifice, like unity, trust, like trusting the humans in Dawn, even though he's got plenty of reason not to, and like trying to instill that in Cobra, but he doesn't get there.
Yeah, I've heard people say like, oh, what I really like about Dawn is when you start to see the great divide and the lines start to blur a bit between what is human and what is ape. You know, like, who is the real savage here? The humans. But this is what but arguably that happens in the first film anyway, because you've got that like Draco Malfoy playing like the prison guard in the chimpanzee sanctuary.
But mate, this is what makes it not preachy though. It like from as early as Rise through to Dawn and through to War, like they never show. It's never like all humans are bad, all apes are good, or all apes are bad, all humans are good. It's always like there's good and bad in all. And I think that's kind of like the idea. It's like you shouldn't judge based on what they are, like as a category. You got to look at them as individuals, and it doesn't do it in a preachy way, man. Like in the apes, you've got Cobra who's like bad Caesar and Maurice, good. Humans, you got James Franco's character, good. Gary Oldman's character, and then like obviously the other humans who like betray like Caesar's trust, like when they go to the dam, and then it all gets a bit like feisty.
Yeah, someone's bought like a shotgun and stuff.
Yeah. But that's one of the things I like about Caesar is like the film kind of explores the inevitability of war, but Caesar's utter resistance to it. Like he only ever accepts that war is necessary when it's necessary. Like he tries to not make it the case as much as he can, and that's how you can believe that whenever he's doing something, he is doing it for the sake of peace and for that goal. Like that's what makes him like such a like proper, like an elevated, transcendent kind of hero, really, because like he's not doing it out of passion. Like all of Koba's stuff is like just purely about him and revenge, but all of Caesar's like attempts at...
Isn't that like explicitly mentioned though, where Caesar calls Koba out on that? I feel like I'm vaguely remembering a scene like that where
in Dawn.
Yeah, where because obviously Caesar's aware that Koba's going a bit to the dark side.
Yeah.
And he's basically saying Koba only ever cares about Koba, where Caesar cares about the family.
Yeah.
We are the apes and stuff like that.
Yeah, it might be, man. But like this is another thing that I like. All the things that are explored, they're not just like done in one scene. Like you see it throughout. You see everything is played out, and I like that. Like if a film's just gonna like have like a scene of betrayal, but then it's like over like by the next scene, and it's not really important to the story. I feel like all these are so well intertwined to the story, and I think that's why a lot of people have really like resonated with these films, because like they really so well written to me. I think they're so intelligently made
as well. They've got I'd say a nice privilege of having a very historical fan base attached to it, even if you weren't around.
Yeah, true.
When that film, you probably inherited it from your mom or your grandparents, your dad or whoever, and you know you probably have come across the original film, and you've got like the oh so classic quotes of like "Don't touch me, you dang dirty ape," which they reference. You know, it's a madhouse.
It's a madhouse by Draco.
But then but that's it. After that film, the only references you come across are like subtle ones, like the gilet that the bad ape wears.
Oh, but mate, we haven't yet talked about like that magical moment, which is also one that they reference, where Caesar's first line, where he just says no, like a 2-word quote, and it's so like memorable and so powerful and impactful. And like that's a reference that I watched a video of some guy, I can't remember who it was, but credit to whoever said this. But he showed like a scene from one of the old Planet of the Apes films, and she's talking about like she's asked like what happened in the beginning or something, this like a female ape, and she's like he was asked to like do something like unreasonable or whatever, and he just said no. And like to use it so brilliantly and implement that into like this reboot, I thought that was brilliant, because I didn't know that, and like obviously everyone loved that scene,
so
but that really amplified it for me. I was like, that's so cool that they paid so much homage to the original ones, but like still took it in a new direction that was fresh. Like, and mate, given all the amount of like reboots that we've had in the last like 20-25 years,
this is probably one of the best.
This is easily one of the most welcome reboots I think we've ever had,
because it's a refreshing one, and anyone that was, I guess, a big fan of the books, the old movies, you get so many nods to it, like the name of the Alpha Omega, that's part of that. Like there was like I've watched 2. So disclosure, I've watched 2 of the old Planet of the Apes. The first one, and then Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and there's like an atomic bomb, and there's like a cult that worships it, and I think there's some Alpha and Omega reference to that, and that's the name of like the troop that, or not the troop, the soldiers in the war.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you've got like the names of certain monkeys. You got like, Maurice. It's the name of like, I believe that's the name of the actor or the character that played Dr. Zell.
Yeah, one of the previous characters.
The orangutan professor doctor in the first one.
Man, how awesome a character is Maurice! Like, what? I'm not actually sure if Maurice is a male or female. Like,
an actress plays Maurice, so maybe that's a hint that it might be female. But Maurice is a male name.
Well, I've always like not really cared, but sort of wondered, because it's like it doesn't really matter, but it does seem like quite a gender neutral character.
I don't think that's really important anyway. I feel like the really touching.
Well, I'm not even saying that's why she's awesome.
No. Awesome. No, of course. I wasn't saying that. I was just saying the things that I liked most about the character Maurice is the inquisitive nature, which obviously is quite commonly associated
endearingly
with
inquisitive,
the orangutan species as a whole.
Yes.
So like he knows how to sign. So Caesar's connection to intelligence. Caesar isn't the only intelligent ape. They're intelligent in different ways.
Yes.
Maurice is intelligent. in like Dawn because he's really interested in the books that the kid has, and he's the teacher of the new society. He's the one that's like pointing to the wall like it's a class, and like these are the rules. Together, ape strong. The
vibe I get from Maurice, mate, he's kind of gentle giant, because Maurice is easily like the biggest one, but always seems so protective over like especially like the kid
in war, right? Yeah,
and it's like it's kind of beautiful. There's almost like a part of us where, like these days in the liberal age, like a lot of people, although there's some art, we try not to be too judgmental based on appearance, but when you see like someone big, you assume that there might be an underlying threat. So it's always a nice subversion, like subconsciously, to have like someone like that just be so gentile.
But then arguably you could extend that with the gorilla, and Rocket and like all the others.
But Maurice has such an
even more gentle.
Yeah, it's a more palpable gentleness, and I think obviously stands out just by looking a bit different as well, because it's the only orangutan I think in the group.
Definitely one of the main ones. He's one of the originals, or she's one of the originals.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like, I'm trying to think if in Rise, War or Dawn I've seen any other orangutans. I can't think, but Maurice is such a key character as well, because once you get to war, like I know I mentioned that Season of Rax and Passion, but obviously there's that moment where his wife and one of his sons are killed, and you see him just like lose his shit, and like no wonder, man, like he's come so far and done all this and been so peaceful and offered so much, and like you see that he's like challenged and he's really pushed to the limit. Like I feel like Dawn took things to a dark place, but War took things where Caesar just so pushed to, and you get to the point where even the audience is thinking, oh, maybe he will, and then he's got this like great friend in Maurice who's like keeping him grounded now, and he's being like, look, you got to keep your head, man. Like, you're kind of losing it. Like, what are you doing?
And this
isn't you.
It's also nice as well that Maurice is then going to be the orator of what Caesar's legacy will become to the new age. He'll tell Cornelius, this is who your father was. This is, and then it will spread into, I guess, the actual Planet of the Apes series that we and our parents and our grandparents were introduced, and then from the book.
Mate, from that perspective, you got to say it's probably one of the best origin stories as well that like has ever been done, because origin stories are infamous for being
quite shocking,
disappointing. But yeah, I mean, there's so many other themes that are at play. You've got like,
well, I think if I'm to think, if we're talking general themes now, number one, I would say it's probably a commentary on like race. At least that's what the original books, the original films, and even still plays on in this.
Or even just general kind of, I don't know if xenophobia is a more broad term.
Fear of the other.
Fear of the other.
Yeah,
it's
exactly
that, yeah. And like, even though it's so, like, obviously it's about that, it's not, like I said, it doesn't feel preachy.
It's not preachy.
To me. It's exploring it in quite a reasonable way, and a way that's easy to understand, and I think will probably make people who are aware of their own prejudices a bit uncomfortable.
Which is why I suppose characters where you've got the really, really good humans, and you've got the really, really good apes, and you've got the really, really bad humans, and apart from appearances, there's no discernible difference when it comes down to it, especially in War. I mean, especially when you consider the fact that you've got in War those the apes and like the gorillas and that switch sides to the humans, because they're fearful that the humans are going to like win anyway, and
they have no belief, self-belief.
Yeah, exactly. And then they're like really humiliated. They're called donkeys, and for a brief moment I was like, is that like a reference to Donkey Kong or something? I
mean, come on, it's
a bit too on the nose.
It could be like a half reference, but
maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's a funny story.
They are arguably like heavy lifted, like pack mules that were used in like the war and stuff.
Yeah,
in like World War II. Grunts that just carry heavy things.
Yeah.
And they're branded, they're owned, they're bossed around. And then they're made the dispensers of punishment. So like they're the ones that whip their own people. You got that Red. I can't remember the name.
It's like Stockholm syndrome / being like almost like cuckolded, but actively. I don't know. It's like some weird
like the
self-hate mentality.
The scene where like Caesar's getting those lashings from that Red, like I think the gorilla's
in
called
War.
Red. Yeah. And like the son, I think it's the son's like wife. She like lifts the stone and she says, "We'll work. Let him go." And that's because It's like an
I
iron.
broke the dam. I broke the. Sorry.
It's almost like an I am Spartacus. We don't whip him anymore. Like, we'll go back to work, because all Caesar ever did is like, give my people water, give my people grain. Again, a very Moses-like.
Yeah, by the time of war, Caesar's willing to like die for his. That's what he's willing to sacrifice. He's willing to die for the cause of like, not even just apes, but what's right. Like, because he always feel like he has humans' best interest in his interest too. He's slightly more edging now towards apes because he is one. But like he always wants. It was about peace. Like, it's not even just about his people. It's about everyone trying to get along. That's what he wants. But it gets to the point where he has to choose because it's too much. But he can't possibly have.
Maybe that's because Caesar is also aware that his greatness had originally come from humanity. He was made aware, where he came from. Like, James Franco's character says, this is where you were born. You were born in a lab. You were born in human creation.
Mewtwo.
You're taught sign language. You're kept in this glorious home. And then I think it's even more apparent because the symbol that the apes use is his window from the attic.
I love when he does that in his cell. It's such a cool moment. And I kind of it was a shame because I thought they overdid it maybe just by one scene. Like, it would have been better if it was just like maybe 2 references, but I think there's like maybe 3, possibly 4.
I remember one in Dawn in the center of their new society, the center stone
where they stand.
Yeah, and
that
I think,
was cool.
But I just think that symbol is representation of home. I think that's all it really is. So,
but there was also a moment where they're on the bus and in the condensation, I think someone does it, and I know it's like it was like it had a function because it was like a symbol to say, all right, now's the time to. I don't know. I think they were doing some kind of heist to free them or something.
Yeah, it was just to break them out. I think it was to symbolise that we are friendly. We are family.
Yes.
I think it just is a pure reference to home because it's directly from Caesar's home that he knew and was raised in.
Yeah.
And then
but it's a great symbol to use.
Yeah, but that's actually very important. I don't think people don't put, if they do it right, people don't put symbols in films just for the sake of throwing the symbol in. I don't think the symbol actually means anything in the sense of like, the shape that they've designed has some reference.
Yeah, no.
The fact that it comes up enough, I can't really remember it in War, if I'm honest, but I remember it in Rise and Dawn.
Yeah, mainly Dawn, I think.
And I think it's because Dawn puts a lot of emphasis on the home, both for the human and the ape. The humans desperately want their internet back, and they want to create a new home again. They want to connect to other society and rebuild humanity.
Yeah,
and the
absolutely.
apes want to build their own society. They want to establish their own home. One, as I keep saying, in accordance with nature, and the humans, bless our souls, we just can't let go of the fact that we really want electricity. And then I felt that it was like a bit of a slap in the face, like point-wise, where like the moment power comes on, a tablet is like the go-to for the guy, and it's because obviously he's got those pictures of his kids, and he has like Gary Oldman's character has like that breakdown and stuff, but it just shows the attachment that we have to those things. And there's a line where the guys that go to fix the dam, and he says, I had to quote because I remembered it halfly and I had to like Google it, but it's like the scariest thing about the apes is they don't need power, they don't need lights, they don't need heat, nothing. That's their advantage. That's what makes them strong.
And I was just going to say, it highlights our vulnerability. Like, we are so dependent on technology now. It's so embedded in, like, everything that we need and use in life. And it does, again, in a non-preacher way, kind of highlight how we take shit for granted. Whereas, like, Caesar and them, like you say, they can just live in a cave, live in trees. They're fine, man. Just fire and hunt some, like, horses, deer, bear, whatever.
Yeah, so you could easily argue the new, one of the then big themes that you could take from this new franchise is like not so much an environmentalist point of view, but there's something to be said about living simplistically and not taking for granted the things that nature bestows upon us, and nature isn't there for the bending. Just to be worked with, flow with the river, type thing. I think each film serves arguably the same purpose. It's the same core theme and message, I suppose. That's why I think it's best to think of them as a whole, and that's why I like how it comes full circle, because any good series, film, or a trilogy or 2 films I think, really achieve the status of being really good when they come to that full circle moment.
Yeah, I think you could watch all three together, and like not only are they consistent, but they follow on in such a really captivating way. You feel like you're on the journey with the apes, you know, especially with Caesar, and through his arc, and you see everything he goes through. I think it's fantastic. I'm so in love with the trilogy.
I know, you're a big fan.
For me, I think this is top 5 movie trilogies all time. Like it's got to be up there with Lord of the Rings, with Star Wars. I know we're gonna do an episode at some point on threequels. Best trilogies, are we? Best threequels?
Yes, I can't remember, but it's around the premises of like
the
3.
And I think this is easily one of them. But do you have a preference, mate? Which would you say? Do you have are you clear cut on which you would say is the best of the 3? Could you rank them at this stage?
If in War, it wasn't so obvious the Judeo-Christian theme, I probably would have said like probably I kind of like War, which is surprising. I have a soft spot for Rise because obviously it's really hard sometimes to beat the first one. Yeah. But I think there's something really nice about Dawn. There's just something about Dawn. I can't quite put my finger exactly on it.
You know,
I think it might be Kobe. You know.
Now, see, I
think it might be Kobe, mate.
In my opinion, I think he's part of it. Well, obviously, he's a huge part of it. But I think it's the fact that Rise is ultimately quite light, and it was so good, and it always takes you by surprise. I mean, we've already talked about the cumbersome name being a bit like, but like it's a reboot. It's a reboot of a kind of cheesy series. It takes you by surprise. But then when there's a sequel, you're kind of thinking, well, can they really do that again? And the best thing about Dawn kind of added like a maturer element to everything we see in Rise.
Like I said, it's where the dystopia starts, arguably.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that might be it, because it starts grittier. You in the first opening scene, besides the the explanation about how the virus spread, the exposition, and you get to like the scene.
Yeah.
It's a zoom in of Caesar's eyes. They're dark. They're focused. He's got
the tribal painting.
Yeah, exactly. So we're already told you're in a different world now. You're in Caesar's world because you're looking at it through. You're going to look at this through his eyes and his conflicts, and then it ends again with the same thing, his eyes, but it's brighter now. And I think that's a throwback to the first film because of like the future and the hope that's still to come, the brighter future. And dawn, it's a dawn of a new age type air quotes cheesy shit.
In terms of like sun, like the sun, for example, like Dawn and Rise is kind of the wrong way around.
Yeah, I know.
But it was a bit of a shame, really.
Yeah.
But no, mate, I still think there's something to the fact that Rise was better than it needed to be by surprise. But then we're so not used to getting sequels that are like as good. But Dawn was, and like it took it to like a darker place, which is a bit of a risk because Rise isn't really that dark. Like it's a fairly light. Like you could probably watch it with like your mum and dad, but Dawn is a bit more
like everyone.
Not everyone's.
Yeah, everyone that you feel deserves a comeuppance in Rise sort of gets it. Like there's a beautiful scene in Rise which I really like. You know, where the CEO of the pharmaceutical company like comes into the foyer and all the apes are standing upright and they're standing around him.
Oh, that's a cool moment.
You know why I think that's great? Because if you look at that from the perspective of Koba, who knows the routine, he gets in the machine, he takes the needles. Yeah. All he has is men in white coats surrounding him, and this time the tables turn. The man in the white coat has got a circle of apes staring down at him, and it's his turn to get poked and prodded. Mm-hmm. So all the people we think should deserve their comeuppance almost get it. The zookeeper dude, like Draco Malfoy guy, you know. And when it comes to Dawn, like I said, the lines are blurred. People that you might be rooting for end up not being the people you want them to be.
Yeah, it has a whole darker tone, and it explores things like tragedy, like betrayal. There's more loss. There's a lot more like sadness to it, and there's like things like compromise as well. And like you see, like you think like Caesar. Like at one point, it kind of makes you think Caesar could be, although you kind of know he's not dead. But like, there's so much things going wrong, and just as you think Caesar's forming something, and that the apes are building, it all kind of comes crashing down.
I think overall, mate, you're right. It's good. I think it's a solid.
It really, it just added more grandeur to the story. You know, like Rise could easily have just ended, and it just like, oh, there's a little origin story to how they. But then Dawn is like, no, we're going to take this further, and we're going to show you like the real moral challenges of Caesar, because I feel like you don't see too much of like, again, the moral challenges you don't really see in Rise, but in Dawn, like Caesar's really like wrestling with whether to offer redemption, and he finally, obviously, like the defeat of Cobra, like he hasn't really done anything like that in Rise yet, and it's like, wow, this guy is like now having to make real sacrifices by killing like someone who he loved.
Do you know what I've just thought of? You know, in War, where Caesar's trying to throw that grenade belt at the gas tank to blow up the wall,
Risking his life.
Yeah, risking his life, and he gets shot by a bolt.
Yeah.
With that dude who he saves, by the way.
Yeah.
And let's go. In the opening scene,
mercy, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
Merciful.
But that's the price of leaders. You know, sometimes your mercy comes to bite you in the ass.
Yeah.
And what I like is, I feel like the Gorilla Red. I hope I'm getting that name right.
Yes, I think you are, mate.
You know, he's being shouted at by the guy. Get me something. Get me this. And he's just staring at Caesar, still fighting to survive. And he caved in. He took not really the easy way out, but he took a way where he had his self-survival, which is what Cobra does. It's always about Cobra, and Red is always about Red. And I feel like we almost get like a mini Cobra redemption, what Cobra could have been if it had let go of, you know, the evil or the badness in him. And he saves the guy because he blows up the dude with the crossbow, and he saves Caesar at the price of his own life, which is what Cobra could never do. Yeah. So I feel like that's when Caesar has the moment where, because he's got Cobra conflictingly chipping away at him, and he starts to doubt himself. Yeah. Is Cobra within me? Is Cobra bleeding in me? And when he sees that ape, the donkey, the mule, the guy that's almost, you know, he's subdued himself to man, his enemy, and he breaks that. He breaks his chains for the greater good, and Caesar's the greater good.
Yeah.
And I think that is a redemption for Caesar too, because if that monkey can redeem himself, I can redeem myself, even if it costs me my life, which it does.
Yeah.
And I think that's just occurred to me now. I think that might have been, if that's what they did, that's a nice bit.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. Mate, one of my favourite things about this whole trilogy and about that progression that you see in Caesar is that he does make mistakes, but predominantly he's so inspirational. But the fact that he makes mistakes, mate, it makes him like not overly idealistic. So like he's actually a hero we can aspire to be. He's not like on that plane of like unattainable morality where he's just like perfect in every way. Like he is flawed, and that makes him someone who we can actually aspire to be more like. And I think that's what makes like a truly great
because
hero.
You don't have to be perfect to start a revolution. There's no revolutionary that's actually created effective change has ever been perfect.
Yeah. And wait, perfection doesn't really exist. It's not attainable.
No, of course, but you know what I mean. Like,
but what I'm saying is like, it also like highlights the fact that we shouldn't try and strive to be perfect. Like I say, greatness is not exclusive to the pinnacle. Yeah. It's like you can be something great, and you don't like you need to be able to accept that for fact you are going to make mistakes. But it's about what are your intentions? What are you trying to do? And again, it's like knowing how to integrate your shadow, essentially, like knowing when you need to like make the difficult decisions that might seem against
part of being a leader, which arguably is one of the core of Dawn as well. That, you know, he was a leader in the beginning, but it's a new type of leadership.
Yeah. So, mate, to intertwine that with all these themes we've talked about, and all of them, none of them are throwaway. All of them are interwoven into the story, like. Oh, I love it so much.
I think we've really discussed the theme, the things that we like about it. What do you think overall, because it's the Dystopia series, what do you think of it as like a dystopia?
Well,
is it one you think you'd survive?
Why? I mean, it seems to be that the humans that are surviving are partly based on immunity more than anything else. Like, for it to take the world so much more than certain other viruses might do. Whether real or not. But yeah, I'm thinking like, I don't think I would. I think it seems like potluck, really. It's look at the draw.
I mean, also
it's like a national lottery.
Knowing now not what I know in War, and obviously like the original Apes, I know that whatever I whether I survive or not, I will regress into a primitive form.
If you survive,
if I survive one way or another, so
regret.
You know,
no, I don't think. No, see, I think it takes a more. It would be over a longer time, like through generations. We would. I don't think you would before you die.
But it's almost implied that it's contagious. Remember, because the Colonel gets it from the little girl who's a mute.
God!
Because
I've just remembered. Yeah, mate, I haven't watched War in a few years. Yeah, of course. It's making them. Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah.
It would not be a nice dystopia to live in, mate. Obviously, it's
no dystopia is nice to live in. That's not the point.
Well, I guess one of the things about going primitive is that you'd be too primitive to know that you're supposed to be miserable and that it's bad,
I think the early ones, no. Because obviously the Colonel has, by the looks of it, some concept of the fact that he was once something, and he makes Caesar shoot himself. Yeah, and so I think it's one I wouldn't survive. I think what the benefit of this series has, it's got a rich history attached to it.
Yeah.
So the dystopian world is very large. It's got lore attached to it. It's a very good dystopian series. But is it the best dystopian one?
Some claim. There would be some claim. I don't think it's the best.
Certainly not from my perspective. It's a good one. I'll give you that.
I'd say it's a great one, but
I mean, what's the likelihood of it happening? Any good dystopian series is always at our own hands that it started, so they've got that tick.
Yeah.
Are there any redeemable qualities in the new society that we find ourselves in? Yeah, there still is. But then arguably, once we go primitive, no.
Well, one of the things I liked is some dystopias are like either overly optimistic or pessimistic about our nature, and I don't think this is. I think it's very realistic. Obviously, I'm like assuming I've never been through one, but like it doesn't take an obviously overtly pessimistic or negative stance. It's not like all humans just turn on each other, and it's not like all humans will, somehow find a solution. Like it very much shows that there's still going to be very normal human themes. Like people are going to turn on each other, but they're also going to try and stick together. Things are going to be tough, but it's essentially just like going back in time to a time where like people didn't have as much money. Like there was like things like rationing and stuff like that. So I thought it took a realistic approach. So from that perspective, definitely scores higher than most dystopias. In terms of like how many different things are at play as well, there aren't like too many things. It's essentially just apes rising up, humans losing.
Well, one thing I would say that's unique about this as a dystopian series, it's a bit like watching a dystopian series where the virus, the bacteria, or the fungus is personified and is relatable. So arguably the apes and like the things that spread the virus, even though they're not the virus, they're the physical, I can touch it manifestation of the reason why there's a virus.
Yeah.
Sort of like the birds for swine, for like bird flu, the pigs for swine flu and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So let's say for example you've got a dystopian universe where let's say for example I Am Legend, that was caused by a virus, but I'm not following the journey of the zombies. We get a brief moment of it where we see the zombies have some love and attachment to their fellow zombie.
Yeah, the end.
Yeah, but I'm not watching it from two perspectives, which is why I think Planet of the Apes, the whole series has a very nice spin on the dystopia, because you see the perspective of the reason why society's at its collapse. From their perspective, it's not their fault.
Yeah.
I'm here at the mercy of nature, even though you created it.
Yeah.
I'm following...
Yeah, so they've got nothing to feel guilty for.
Yeah, I mean, the virus doesn't feel guilty, but you get what I mean? We're actually seeing it personified.
Yeah, because they're personified, and they still don't, though. Like arguably, like, you could try and argue that they should, but they shouldn't.
Yeah. So, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic, mate. Like, interesting, captivating, moving, breathtaking trilogy. Like...
I mean, it's probably going to be one of the few dystopian trilogies that we'll cover. The rest are all going to be like either books or...
Yeah, well, I think... If we do, like, when we come to our Matrix episode, which is inevitable, I think we should focus on the first one because...
Oh, you're not a big fan of the rest?
I don't know, mate.
Oh, never mind.
Is anybody? Nah, 2 was okay, but 3...
I'll have to probably rewatch them. I can't really remember that well. But yeah, shall we give...
Yeah, I think we can wrap up.
Yeah. Are we going to... What's the next one we've got planned? Was Children...
Next episode, Children of Men.
The dystopian series, yeah.
Dystopian series, yeah. Next
Perfect. All right, let's wrap up. All right.
Super.
All right.
You've been listening to the Barrow Dogs podcast with Alex and Chris. Be sure to check out our other content, and if you like what you heard today, feel free to subscribe to keep up to date with future episodes. Thanks for listening.